Welcome you all to our panel, Voices from Ukraine, War Through the Eyes of Artists, where 4 Ukrainian artists and cultural workers are sharing their experience from the front lines in Ukraine. The panel will be our very last, and to me it's the most special and probably most important, because I think we're finally getting to hear those people whose lives are actually affected by Russia's aggression. But we're also going to raise some of the most difficult and serious questions to answer. And that is, how do we actually think about violence during wartime? How can we render visible and grasp atrocities that most often actually extend beyond what can be verbally expressed and represented? And I think it seems as though we are trying to square the circle here. What resists any form of representation actually demands just that. But how can we actually do that? As some of you here in the audience actually have seen in the film that we're screening next door, the art of film can actually be a powerful tool for both the affected to deal with trauma and for us as the spectators to get a feel for the experience of war. So it creates empathy, not pity, and it leads us to actually acknowledge that these wartime survivors are not merely passive victims, but actually have agency of their own lives. So can art actually visibilize the nuances of war without objectifying the realities on the ground? I believe it can. Art matters, as Daniil and Lyle once forcefully put it. It matters ethically and politically. It matters effectively and intellectually. So it can serve as a site in which key political issues and dilemmas of our time are actually felt and negotiated, especially at a time during which the graphic images of the war in Ukraine are actually all around us, but they start to recede into the background. I believe we have the special responsibility to create spaces for Ukrainians to share their experiences of war. And it is not on us as the observers to speak, it is for Ukrainians to create access to their world and for us to interpret it. So this panel is actually meant as one of the spaces in which we can actually encounter not only Ukrainian voices, but especially Ukrainian artists or cultural workers who act as their facilitators. And not all of the artists that we have here on this panel are necessarily directly or immediately dealing with Russia's war in Ukraine in their art, nor do they necessarily believe that they are doing political work, but each in their own ways has contributed to documenting the war, finding ways to engage with the war and us as their consumers. This is their story, and I actually hope you will vividly engage as well within the context of the Q&A. Before we start, I do have 2 caveats. Just first, that the panel will be in German for those parts when I ask Marushko to actually speak and to present her work. She just prefers German over English. And second, I want to add a disclaimer that some of Daniil's work that we will see in a moment contains graphic images. So to finally get to present and introduce my panelists, let me start with Mariia. Mariia studied social sciences at Kyiv Mogila Academy and has worked in the communications team of the Hamburg-based international production house Kampnagel since 2018. As part of an alliance with other production houses in Germany, she's launched and now coordinates the Voices Ukraine platform, which is an online archive for Ukrainian artists and cultural workers to share their everyday stories of war. Let me continue with Leo. You can see up there. You will see him later on in a bigger picture. he has contributed to the Voices Ukraine platform as an artist, and he's actually written, I would say, a diary-like piece on the very normalization of war. Leo is originally from Dnipro, but he studied the history and theory of art at the Lviv National Academy of Arts and at the Kyiv Academy of Media Arts. And he works with audio, performance, and video, and is most interested in exploring urban transformations as a result of decommunization politics, and he promotes critical thinking of the Soviet heritage. Yulia, who you see here in the yellow dress, aka Marushka, is a Ukrainian artist and Waldorf school teacher who has been living in Hamburg since 2013. In solidarity, however, with the Ukrainian demonstrators during the Ukrainian Revolution on Maidan, she created an artistic chronology of the events, and she painted the so-called Heavenly Hundred that lost their lives on Maidan. Today, she will take us actually back to the beginning of Russia's war against Ukraine. And let me point out that she actually, within the context of the full-scale invasion, evacuated all of her Waldorf school pupils, including their mothers, from Lutsk to Hamburg when Russia invaded Ukraine in February. Last but not least, Daniil Russov, who you will also see in a moment in a greater picture. He is a Ukrainian documentalist photographer, and he studied at the University of Wrocław in Poland at the Department of Journalistics, and he has since been working in Kyiv. I got to know Daniil in September this year when I was visiting Hamburg's Deichtorhallen, where his photographic work from liberated villages near Kyiv, like Bucha and Borodyanka, was on display during the temporary exhibition, The New Abnormal. Sadly, it's no longer on display. I think they just ended the exhibition last week. The exhibition was, however, curated in cooperation with the Odessa Photo Days. He is currently joining us, and I need to underline that, from the war-torn front lines of Donbass, where he works as a fixer and accompanies the Ukrainian army. And I'm actually really glad that he's here today, because it could be otherwise, and it could have been otherwise a few days ago. Okay, so to my first question, Daniil and Leo, I hope you can hear us all well. Okay.
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Okay. So can you hear me now?
Yeah, I heard everything, yes, but except the last part.
Yeah, so you missed my introduction then. Daniil and Leo, you actually have been two wanderers within your own country since the war hit the entire country. And you've been wandering from one place to another. Can you just give us a few insights into where you are at the moment, what you do at the moment, what you've been up to over the past 8 months, and how you actually got to do what you currently do? So in more general terms, how does it feel being an artist during war times? And have you been actually able to adapt to this new abnormal, just as the exhibition at Deichtorhallen suggests? Who wants to take a lead?
I can try to make a contribution. Hello, everyone. I'm Leo. When I have public talks, I always get worried, so I ask you for understanding. Maybe I will be confused with my thoughts, but nevertheless, I will try to be clear as I can. Yeah, now at the moment, I'm in Kyiv at my apartment and studio. Such a coincidence, 10 minutes before our conversation and this panel, the electricity was turned off, so I'm using mobile internet connection to get to you. And I hope that works well. Yeah, I removed several times before after the full-scale invasion. To be briefly, I'll call it the war, because it's the second iteration of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, but more crucial and complex. Yeah, I was driven by my fear in the end of February, so that's why I think around 27th of February I was already in western part of Ukraine, in Lviv, and spent there around 3 or 4 months with my colleagues and friends. So in this case, I would say, because I was studying and living in Lviv before the full-scale invasion, somehow I stayed at home in Lviv. So I wouldn't say that I have. So I wouldn't say that I have displaced experience in that sense, that a lot of people from Ukraine, even our friends or not our friends, whatever. So I have relatively safe experience. So yeah, and now until from June, I'm staying in Kyiv, trying to work and adapt to new reality. Because every month something new is going on, and you should adapt to it if you want to work and live. So that's it. I think Daniil maybe can add something interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, guys. I have the same problem as Leo with public talks, because I usually can get lost if I speak too long, so I'll try to be as clear as possible. So I'm 25 years old, and also during the war I changed a lot of places. I didn't move from one place to another completely, only once, but I met war in Kyiv on 24th of February when Russian rockets started landing on Kyiv streets and Kyiv buildings, and I decided to move first to Western Ukraine because it seemed much more safer. And then being there, I understood that probably I had this kind of adrenaline rush, and I think many Ukrainians felt that on the third day, when we actually saw in news that Zelensky didn't run anywhere, that Ukrainian army actually stopped this columns of Russian tanks and armed vehicles in the outskirts of Kyiv, so we actually can resist. So I had this really serious adrenaline rush, and I went to Odessa because this city, I believe it's the most, it feels like home to me, even though I haven't born there. And my plan was actually to join territorial defense, which is like alternative to the Ukrainian army. And when I came to Odessa, I found out that it's a lot of men who are willing to join territorial defense. It's big lines. And they just told me something like, go to another office, maybe they will take you. So I decided, like, if they don't want me, I will just volunteer. And I thought, what can I do? And the only thing I can do is cook. So I decided I will be a cook for soldiers. I was volunteering on the kitchen, and a lot of Odessa restaurants, they worked in this volunteering regime. They just worked for their own money. They didn't earn a cent. And I joined one restaurant, and I was working like this for 1 month, almost without weekends, because there's no weekends in war. And then the turning point was when I saw the material from Mariupol maternity house made by Ukrainian journalists Evgeny Malaletka and Mstislav Chernov. They worked for Associated Press agency, and they were the last journalists who stayed in Mariupol, which was almost occupied by Russian troops, and they barely survived. And probably all of you have seen these photos with pregnant lady escaping from the bombed house of maternity house. And actually this material influenced me so much that I decided that probably I'm doing something wrong, and I have to at least try to document the war in my country, since I'm a photographer. And this is how my photographic journey in this war started. I just decided to start from the occupied Kyiv region. I visited a lot of villages. I spent a lot of time with local people, making portraits of them, photographing the rubble, the aftermath of shelling, of airstrikes. Yeah, and slowly I got used to the danger, let's say, and then I went to Kharkiv, spent 1 month there. In July, I visited Donbass for the first time in my life. I have never been in Donetsk or Lugansk region before. And yeah, now I'm in Donbass too, in the field conditions, speaking to you from Starlink connection.
Thank you, Daniil. Thank you. Mariia and Yulia, you had a very different experience because you weren't able to actually witness it yourself in Kyiv. You were here based in Hamburg. You had to witness it from a distance. The war was unfolding, and you had to actually work here and live here as though nothing had happened. How does it now feel as a Ukrainian? How has it felt over the past 8 months not being ready to actually help your family right next to each other at home? And how have you been able to actually adapt to this new abnormal situation? Mariia?
Maybe I should start with the thing how my day started today, because it was maybe this would just give a bit of a hint like what the reality is. My family is now in Kyiv. My brother's family with 3 kids is in Kyiv, and they stayed there through the whole time since February. And then now they are deprived of electricity for at least like 5-6 hours every day. During the day and in the evening. So with 3 kids, it's really difficult. Then they don't do homeschooling, they cannot cook food, they don't have connection and everything. I mean, there is so much that is relying on electricity. And then today I had to send over the electricity generators so they would have the electricity. And this is what I did whole morning till basically I came here at 2. I was just running around trying to find someone who would transport it, and then trying to figure out this thing about the border and the taxes and everything. And this is something that has been going on already for 9 months. I wake up every morning, I check up if my family is alive still, if they're fine, then I get ready for work, then I go do my work, and then afterwards I do whatever, volunteering and everything that could make at least the difference on the small scale level. And this is something that I feel like this is the new abnormal, because I actually know that my friends who are not Ukrainians, then they wake up on Saturday morning and then maybe they drink their coffee, and then they don't have to worry if their family is alive, if they have electricity, if they have connection, if they were not bombed. And I know that they have to do it. And well, for me, the war didn't start actually on the 24th of February, because since 2015, I was working along the front line a lot, because I was working for the humanitarian organization, Child Protection Organization. And then we were working a lot on the villages in Donbass, Luhansk, and Donetsk regions. And then, of course, it was really, really hard back then already, because this is the reality that I could see people are living. And these were also people who I could relate to very much, because they are the same citizens of my country. And then, of course, before 24th of February, I was in Ukraine, and I left Ukraine on the 16th of February. And then there was something already in the air that you could feel, like people were getting ready. They were getting ready with their evacuation suitcases. And this was something where I felt really, really much fear, actually, for my family. And this fear came from this experience that I made in Donbass, because I knew what it means whenever everything is destroyed, whenever people's lives are ruined because their loved ones are dead or now displaced or had to flee. And then, of course, this makes something with person. It's really, really difficult, and it makes something with you, and it leaves a really long-lasting impact. And then, of course, when the full-scale invasion began, then somehow all of the people from the Ukrainian community, we were kind of like getting together and building this really, really big, wonderful support system, I would say, for each other, and then caring for each other, providing a lot of different things. But I feel like we have put so much things in place, like different volunteering initiatives, different great things that just helped us to keep somehow going, to be honest. And this is probably the most precious thing that came out of these experiences that we made. But of course, there is another side of reality, which is normally, you know, you wake up, then you check if your family is alive, then you go to work, and then at work, every one of your colleagues does not make the same experiences as you. So you actually have to perform on the level like nothing is happening, because you're still living in a different reality. Still people don't understand you. Still people don't go through the same thing as you. And then you have to keep going and just adjust to it. And it's possible. I mean, it's possible to adjust. It's difficult, and I would not wish it for anyone, but it's possible. And this is what the reality looks, at least for me, like now.
Ja, vielleicht kannst du daran anschließen. Wie hast du die letzten 8 bis 9 Monate erlebt? Wie hast du dich an die neue Realität tatsächlich angepasst?
8 Jahre, würde ich sagen. Weil für mich, das ist tatsächlich keine Monaten oder Tagen. Seit 2013, die Revolution beginnt. Ich kam nach Hamburg, war alles neu. So habe ich Stadt kennengelernt, Leute. Und als ich auch heute gewartet habe ich gefunden in seinem Gedicht, das ist was Neues. Vielleicht das passt auch Zustand, was schließt jetzt. Keiner fragt, welcher Baum du bist. Wo sind deine Wurzeln? Kein Land, sondern Blatt auf dem Baum deines Lebens. Ist da schon Herbst oder immer noch Herbst? Die Blätter fallen nach oben. 20. Februar ist mein Geburtstag, und eigentlich das ist der blutigste Tag auf Maidan-Protesten. So der einzige Tag, wo ich keine Nachrichten geguckt habe. Und schon später am Abend Kum, das ist ein ganz wichtiges Wort in der Ukraine, ich kann nicht Kum übersetzen. Das heißt, sie hat Kind und ich bin Partnerkind, und sie ist meine Kuma. Das ist viel wichtiger als Verwandte. Ja, die haben mich angerufen und haben gesagt, Marushka, alles Gute zum Geburtstag, aber das ist alles so schrecklich. Und ich dachte, ja, schrecklich, alles ist schrecklich. Wir fliehen da schon seit 3 Monaten, ich meine, ich war in Hamburg, aber je weiter, desto schwieriger. Von hier ganz viel gemacht. In Hamburg, wo noch keiner wusste, was ist ukrainische Kultur. Wir haben Filme in Metropolis Kindern gezeigt, ukrainische Band nach Stubnitz, alles ohne Ahnung, oder erst jetzt lerne ich, wie macht man das eigentlich? Antrag stellen, Geld gewinnen und dann machen. Ich habe einen guten deutschen Freund gehabt, der hat bezahlt, ich habe meine Freunde eingeladen, die bei uns in Eppendorf irgendwo tatsächlich im Zelt übernachtet haben. Und wir haben ganz viele tolle Sachen gemacht. Und auf einmal 20. Februar, spät am Abend, bekomme ich Anruf. Und das war an diesem Abend 80 oder mehr als 80 Menschen erschossen wurden. Und wo wir sind, für mich, das ist ein bisschen, erinnert mich an Kyiv, weil das ist Universität hier, und meine letzten 7 Jahre habe ich in Kyiv gelebt. Ich komme aus Westukraine, Lutsk. Das war so ein Schock für mich, weil das Land habe ich verlassen, das ist einfach Hauptstadt, alles gut, alles schön, na gut, Revolution, habe ich schon Orange Revolution mitgekriegt und dann noch eine Revolution. Und auf einmal, diese Menschen sind tot. Und das ist ist das meine Stadt? Was kann ich tun? Und das ist mein Geburtstag. Und seitdem dieser Trauertag, was nicht nur mein Geburtstag ist, sondern schon seit Jahren finde ich als Trauer, das lässt mich nicht los, obwohl ich bin so eine bunte Schmetterling und in alle Sachen finde ich positiv, zum Beispiel so meine neuen Freunde, die jetzt auch in Hamburg seit März sind, frisch aus dem Container, wir haben Schule für die Kleinen gefunden, neues Zuhause, meine Eltern sind hier, noch ein Kapitel, was das für mich heißt, obwohl ich schon mehr als 16 Jahren irgendwie alleine irgendwo bin. Mein Bruder kämpft seit ersten Tag als Freiwilliger irgendwo an die polnische Grenze, Belarus. Noch ein Cousin ist schon wieder, er war schon in Lysychansk und jetzt keine Ahnung, wo tatsächlich das schlimm ist. Alle meine Freunde aus Kunstszene, die schreiben jetzt doch Musik, wenn die Licht haben, aber die verteidigen jetzt das Land. Sogar diese Wörter kenne ich auch nur vom Geschichtsunterricht. Und genau, das war einfach in der Zeit hier. Er war nicht der Erste, der erschossen wurde, aber das Bild, ich habe gesehen, und zu dieser Zeit war ich noch in Waldorfschule Fernsehen als Praktikanten, einfach gemalt, dieses Bild, und zu Protest gegangen, zu Konsulat. Das war der Anfang. Ohne Ahnung, ich male jetzt politische Bilder. Wenn man mich fragt, warum deine Kunst ist politisch, seid ihr bescheuert? Das sind Menschen. Das sind doch Radikale. Guck, ich lese so ein bisschen. Bogdan Soltjanek, 1, 2, 3. Ukrainer, aus der Region Lemberg, 28 Jahre alt, Geschichtsdozent an der Universität, erschossen am 20.02.2014. Er hinterlässt eine Verlobte. Serhii Bajdowski, schwarz. Ukrainer, wohnhaft in der Region Wolinien, 23 Jahre alt, erschossen in der Institutska Straße am 20.20. Nazar Wojtowicz, der Zweite. Ukrainer, 17 Jahre alt, Unfreiwillig aus der Region Ternopil, Student. Hingerichtet durch einen Kopfschuss am 20.02.2014. Er war der Jüngste unter den Opfern, einziger Sohn seiner Eltern. Das war Schock. Das war so ein Schock, dass ich konnte 4 Jahre sogar nicht tanzen, weil ich konnte nicht das verstehen, wie kann das tatsächlich sein in so einem europäischen Land, einfach so wie jetzt am Münchener Straße. Man erschießt dann die Menschen, die ganz friedlich dann stehen. Natürlich, es gibt in der Geschichte Beispiele, das kann man sagen, gut, das sind kein 1000, aber 2013, 2014 für uns Ukrainer, das war ganz schlimme Zeiten. Maidan-Revolution, Krim-Annexion und dann Kriegsbeginn. Und heute alle fragen nach meiner Stimme. Ich habe ein bisschen schon Deutsch gelernt, auf einmal alle wollen Ukrainisch hören. Wir haben die ganze Zeit vor 8 Jahren gesagt, Krieg, Krieg, und das war wie Echo, Konflikt, Konflikt, Welten. Und wir so, Krieg, Krieg. Und jetzt auf einmal, bam, bam, mach das, guck mal, das ist jetzt Krieg. Okay, mein Land ist jetzt zerstört, alle sind, ich bin auch schon tot übrigens. Da scheint nur so, dass ich lebe. Aber jetzt, nach 8 Jahren, finde ich schon ein bisschen spät, ich persönlich, wir sitzen hier und erzählen, wie ist das eigentlich, wenn Krieg ist? Ich weiß nicht, für mich finde ich meine Frieden. Und, aber, was ich sagen will, von diesen 8 Bilder, die ich heute ausgewählt habe, und das sind nicht umsonst ausgewählte Bilder, weil die Zivilgesellschaft in der Ukraine entwickelt sich sehr gut und schnell im Vergleich zu politischen, na gut, auch, aber irgendwie das ist so eine Tendenz. Und da sind die Leute, die sozusagen weiterleben, im Sinne von, wie kann ich sagen, unauslebt. Das heißt, dass jeder Mensch, der im Leben was gemacht hat, aber jetzt nicht mehr da ist, dass so ein Verein hat die Stiftungen gemacht. Das heißt, ich kann jetzt das auf Ukrainisch, das Xenia versteht ein bisschen, was ich erzähle, weil sie muss noch Deutsch und Englisch lernen. Und Marco, du kannst vielleicht auf Englisch lesen. Zum Beispiel Nazar Wojtowicz, das ist der Jüngste, der Zweite, er war 17 und hat sehr gut gemalt, wollte Künstler werden. Und jetzt в його селі є культурна резиденція.
Okay. Honors named after Nazar Wojtowicz, the youngest hero of the 1700s, dreamt to be an artist. The artistic residence founded jointly with the PO, the Congress of Activists of Culture in the Travnevo village, Ternopil region, a place where Nazari was born.
Dann Богдан Солчаник, das ist der Dritte. В нього є фонд, де в університеті можуть люди вчитися, отримувати за це гроші і продовжувати.
Honors named after Bogdan Solchanik, a historian and public figure, a tutor of the Ukrainian Catholic University in Kyiv.
Und noch der mit dem Hund, das ist Yulia Verbitsky aus Lviv. Und vor 8 Jahren ist verschwunden. Sein Hund hat die ganze Zeit gewartet auf ihn. Und dann hat man ihn gefunden, irgendwo im Wald mit Folten. Ein Grund war auch, dass er so ukrainischsprachig war. Und das war alles vor 8 Jahren. Und в день, коли Юрія вбили, він отримав звання кандидата наук. Співавтор 46 наукових статей і доповідей, цілі низки наукових звітів. Відзнака імені Юрія Вербицького покликана мотивувати використання наукових доробків у сучасних наукових дослідженнях.
Honor named after Yuri Verbitsky. The day Yuri was killed, he received the PhD diploma. Co-author of 46 scientific articles, abstracts, and scientific reports. He elected a struggle for freedom.
Und es gibt so mehr davon, das heißt, ich habe tatsächlich ein Jahr gemalt, ohne Plan warum. Das war einfach von mir ein Wunsch, diese schrecklichen Sachen zu stoppen. Ich dachte, wenn ich finde jetzt die Ersten, die gestorben sind auf dem Maidan, dann vielleicht wird alles gut. Aber natürlich hat das gedauert und gedauert. Und im Sommer dachte ich, oh mein Gott, ich muss jetzt prüfen, male ich jetzt richtig, weil jetzt kannst du viele Bücher lesen. Und so habe ich meine Leute aus Kyiv gefragt. Ich bin Journalistin von Beruf und kenne auch ganz viele. Und die haben gesagt, dass die Witwen von Maidan, die haben schon sich geeinigt und so Verein gegründet. Und dann sind wir immer noch in Kontakt. Und natürlich nach 9 Jahren, das persönlich für mich schwierig war, wieder diese Mappe aufzumachen und versuchen, etwas zu erzählen. Ich möchte nur sagen, dass diese 100, man sagt himmlische 100, auf Maidan offiziell 104 Leute, die da gestorben sind. Viele sind noch verschwunden oder verletzt. Mein guter Freund, er ist immer noch im Rollstuhl. Die Zivilgesellschaft macht ganz viel, dass man die nicht vergisst. Die Leute, die das gemacht haben, sitzen immer noch in den Gefängnissen. Unser Ex-Präsident Janukowitsch wollte jetzt von Belarus schon wieder auf weißem Pferd reiten, aber hat das nicht geklappt. Und viele von diesen Familien, die Eltern, die sind schon auch gestorben, weil die versuchen natürlich Gerechtigkeit und das ist auch noch die Frage. Wollte ich sagen, dass auf Maidan waren nicht nur Ukrainer, das waren Menschen aus Armenien, Belarus, Georgien, Russland, Deutsche war da. Und da war noch die Zeit, wo ich konnte die Geschichte erzählen, ganz persönlich. Das ist zum Beispiel Sergei Nevoyan, er wollte Schauspieler werden. Seine Familie kommt aus Armenien, als da Krieg begann. Die Familie ist nach Ostukraine geflohen. Nach 20 Jahren erschossen auf Maidan. Das ist die Geschichte. Alles, was ich machen kann, für mich persönlich, das nicht zu vergessen.
Thank you for actually taking us back to the very beginnings and for reminding us that this wasn't the beginning, the 24th of February this year, and for actually giving these people that died in 2013, 2014, actually a face, right? That we can see who these people were, and thank you for actually sharing their stories. You've already shown us that you had your own way of documenting the war, but this is actually a common practice that you also see in the media. It's a common practice by culture workers and artists, and maybe you all followed the ceremony of the prestigious Peace Prize of the German book trade, where Seri Sadan was actually given the prize. And he's one of the most famous novelists in Ukraine, and he actually engaged in that very practice of documenting the war via social media platforms like Facebook. He used Facebook to actually share his story from the east of Ukraine. So Mariia, you actually created a platform for artists to actually share their stories. And that platform is called Voices Ukraine. How did you actually get to set up this platform? And why do you believe creating a platform for artists to document the everyday experience of war is actually so important? Could you just say something about what actually motivates you in that very undertaking?
I had this idea to create this platform when I was in Ukraine in January. And then there was already, like, Russia was building the troops around Ukrainian borders. And then my mom, I was there for Christmas, and then she was preparing this evacuation suitcase. And I went to buy for her the isolation mat and stuff. And then I came back to Germany for shortly. And then I was reading here the news, and then I realized that actually everything in the news is displayed on such a political level that you cannot really understand that actually these are lives of people, and people are affected. These are the lives of individuals, their daily routines, everything is affected. And whenever you read it just in numbers, this many troops, and this is how on the political level it's decided, then you actually, it's really hard to grasp that what does it mean for individuals. And then there was this platform that was initiated by the 7 production houses, among them is Kampnagel, where I work. And then it was a platform that was initiated at the times of pandemics in order to give the artists the voice during the times of pandemics from the different regions of the world. And then there was this idea to take this platform, and then I asked if it would be possible to take this platform and give the voice to the artists from Ukraine. And then it was January, and then I suggested, because I said, you know, it just reminds me very much of this like book of Judith Butler, where the people's lives are just portrayed on this like really, really inhumane level when they start not mattering. And then I said, I really want lives of people to matter. That's why I would really like to have this platform. And then they were like, yeah, but you know, it's just not the time now. We have so many problems in the world and stuff like this. And then on February 24th, it was the time. It was the time, of course, and then we started using the platform. I think it was for me also really important thing, because it is something whenever you are now already like on February 24th and 25th, but you still have to do something. And then this was the moment when I thought, well, I can do this platform. I would be contacting the artist, and actually people started writing their diaries and then just telling how they had this like what were their experiences during the first days of war. But actually what I found really important, there were also the contributions, for example, of the artist whose name is Katerina or Pavlo Yurov. And then these are the people who fled from Donbass and who were actually in 2014, for example, captured by the so-called DPR troops, LNR and DPR troops, and then this were of the self-proclaimed republics. And this was something that I found really, really important, because I feel like for people here, the war in Ukraine started on the 24th of February, which is not true. It started in 2014, and people were affected. And you know, the stories where people were telling about this, about their experiences already back then, I felt it was really important just to give this human face and human perspective to it, and then also create this archive that will be a part of history, because history is also not just numbers and some political decisions, but it's also lives, testimonies of people, testimonies of those who are affected, who lost their lives, or who were lucky to stay alive.
Thank you. Leo, we can actually continue with you because you were one of the contributors to exactly this platform, Voices Ukraine, and you actually shared a diary entry about the mercilessness of this abnormalization of the war. Since then, you've been, as we heard, moving around in Ukraine, and I was just wondering how the war has actually impacted your art and how it maybe found its way into your art. Have maybe the subjects, have the methods actually changed compared to what you did actually before the 24th of February? Maybe you can provide some examples if you wish.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to say that this text that was appeared in Voices of Ukraine is a kind of it's something looks like that documenting non-frontline and life of just ordinary human. It wasn't artistically based or made work. That was just a kind of scream, just text with several photographs that that was on my way of escaping the Kyiv. So it wasn't displaced experience. As I said previously, it was rather looks like escaping. Yeah, and I would say that this second iteration of the war, as Mariia mentioned, for me became the big problem for myself, because this work that started at 2014 wasn't so much affected my life directly, indirect way, as Pasha Yurov's life, who was whose life was under the dredge of so-called LDNR troops. Yeah, I'd like to show you a couple of works that I did after 24th of February. I prepared some pieces also that I made before this full-scale invasion, but I think now it's not so important, not according to our conversation. But I would like to say that there are a couple of things for me in my work that were and are important in my work. So kind of several methods wasn't changed. What do I mean? I'm still interested in, let's say, decommunization policy in Ukraine and revising of history in a vast way, because after full-scale invasion, there are a lot of monuments and ideological markers in the public space and streets of Ukraine dismantling. Yeah, and also for me it's very important subcultures and communities, and the main optics which kind of tool for me for work is sense of humor, and that's the thing that didn't change, even the reality which I'm trying to connect radically changed. So I would show you my screen. Yeah, I'd like to show you 3 works that was made after 24th. Here is I've started actually to make embroideries on a textile, which isn't common working way and medium for me. Usually I'm working with performance and sound art, but not only. I started to work with embroidery. This is the medium that has therapeutic for sure potential, but also it helps to work more punky and not be you shouldn't have a lot of technique equipment and any technique at all, actually. This first one called the first embroidery by Troćenko. This is my original name in the passport, and it's directly the first embroidery with this tiny text that combines with this red arrow that shows people where the nearest shelter in the Ukrainian cities could be found to hide during air raid alarms because of potential missilings of Russian rockets along Ukraine. The second one that I'd like to say, this shelter star, it's kind of combination of these red arrows on the textile that I found somewhere in a second hand, and it was, I don't know, some child thing to not to be to defend child from dirt when it's eaten. And what I'd like to do is to make some kind of compass using these red arrows that help people to navigate in the city to find this so-called safe space, let's say. But there are no safe space in Ukraine. Somewhere it's more dangerous for sure, as in frontline or cities that nearby frontline, like Mykolaiv or Kharkiv or Kherson or whatever. But I'd like to say and show this through the sign of compass that navigates you to now where actually you can go any direction in Ukraine physically if you are outside your home, but you never find the really safe space where you shouldn't be wanted or somehow be not under threat. What I should add that this works hasn't so much a lot of distance that usually mentioned that contemporary art should have distance to produce their works, to have this meta position, and because art should be kind of not knowledge production. It should be objective and show our social, political, and etc. reality as it is. I wouldn't say that these couple of works that I'm showing you have this distance, because it's impossible, absolutely, and I think this is not a big problem, or not problem at all, to have a less distance to the reality and to the processes that are hidden here in Ukraine. It's also a power to show your openness, and the last work that I'd like to show is actually somehow connected with my interest to the decommunization processes that hidden in Ukraine from 2016 or 17, and after this package of laws were established. What does it mean for us, for Ukrainians, that Soviet marks and signs and monuments and place markings like street names should be removed and critically rethinked because this ideological market space somehow affected our reality and our thinking. So I decided I decided to work with one of the monuments of Red Commando that killed a lot of Ukrainians during the establishing the power of Red Army and establishing Soviet Ukraine in 20th last century. And actually, this is the moment of Shorst, a horse monument that stays nearby the railway station in Kyiv on one of the main city arterias, and it somehow works as an architectural element that helps to compositionally to figure out and take these lines of big streets. This figure couldn't be barely removed because the compositional work of architecture will be not working, and I decided to how I can contribute this situation. From one hand, to decommunize and de-ideologize this figure of the traitor and executor and its monument staying from 1954. And I decided to work cynically and with sense of humor, as I understand the sense of humor, and I decided to turn the figure of this rider 180 degrees, so he is facing actually the figure on the horse. He is facing the opposite direction, the direction of the back of the horse, and he becomes some kind of funny and dummy figure, not the executor, but a trickster. And to the end, I want to add that a couple of days ago there was a law, or actually, there was the news that this monument should be removed as also monument of Vatutin, another Red general that was important in times of Second World War, and he was part of Soviet iconography and Soviet myth of winning in the war, of unity between republics, and so on and so on. So this mark that I made somehow accorded in the situation. So yeah, thank you guys. Until the end, I was a little confused, but if you have some questions, you can ask me free. Thanks.
Thank you, Leo. Yes, we will have plenty of time after Daniil is in the round to actually ask questions about your work. Thanks for sharing it. Daniil, last but not least again, you're probably one of the artists who we could claim have documented the war, or the most recent invasion actually, most directly through your art. Why have you started to actually document the war through your art, and what motivates you or drives you in this undertaking? How exactly do you document the war? Could you maybe share some of your work as well?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the problem with me is that I don't really know what I'm doing. So I don't have like conceptualized answer on what exactly this project is, why I'm motivated to do these photos and to go to these places. Probably the most sincere answer would be just my love to photography. I just like taking pictures. And historical moment of this full-scale war, it's rather just a perfect ecosystem for looking for these stories, because wars usually, why war photography is like the most it's the biggest segment of documentary photography in history. It's because war usually exposes a lot of human aspects, and it's nothing new. So I'm not surprised that when it was started in March, I felt this internal urge to go and just to be there and to see it, not to see the war only through Telegram channels or God forbid some television programs. I really had this urge to go and to see it through my photo lens. So yeah, probably every trip that I make, it's some kind of journey for me. I think it's probably very subjective and egoistic work. It's some kind of voyeurism of war. But on another hand, I really feel that pictures that I make film photography. So when I come back and I develop my films and I publish them or show it to people, to my friends, I really see that these pictures are somehow changing people's reception of what's going on. And maybe this is the utilitarian purpose of what I'm doing, because I see how people react to this. Sometimes they're shocked, sometimes they're surprised. So some informative reason of that also is present. And answering to the question how my perception of what I'm doing changed during this time, I think I really enjoyed the first month, maybe until July, when I was just going to places and I completely didn't have any concept. I didn't have any project in my head. I just, as I say, I just had this urge and this drive to make pictures, to listen to stories, even though it was psychologically very difficult. And for sure it was traumatic a lot, but at the same time it had this therapeutical function for me, because one thing again is looking at these stories and hearing this, seeing these pictures and hearing the stories from some media, some Telegram groups. Another hand is listening to them in person, and for sure it's much more difficult, but in the end you have some kind of catharsis which makes your feelings cleaner, or you feel much more on your place than when you sit in some peaceful cities, less dangerous cities, as Leo said, like, because there is no safe space in Ukraine. When I sit in Kyiv, usually I can do it for a couple of weeks. Then I have this kind of depression that I'm outside of what's going on, where I'm outside of the places where the things are happening. This is why being with history, let's say, with people that are suffering, hearing their stories, documenting this, it really has some kind of therapeutical function. So as I said before, I didn't have anything except this. And then when I collected some material, of course, speaking to people, to other photographers, to some curators even, I understood that usually when people do this, they have some kind of concept, and someone is making a book, someone is making an article. And this is a bad thing for me. I really feel it, because it kills this irrationality in what you're doing, and it puts your work in some kind of frames. And this is what I'm doing now. I'm just trying to fight this this rationality in my work. Yeah. Regarding politics,
share some of your work.
Yes. Unfortunately, I speak by phone, so
yeah, I can share it with the others. Wait.
Thank you.
Because I think it's so important to actually take a look at what you do.
Okay, so yeah.
You see it?
Yes.
Maybe describe to the group what you captured there, what you tried to convey, what actually happened in those pictures.
Yeah, this picture I took in April when I just started traveling, and it was liberated village of Velika Dymerka in Kyiv region. It's like 30 minutes by car from Kyiv. This village was occupied for more than a month and a half, I guess, and I came there with my friends, journalists from Great Britain that I just met in Kyiv, and we decided to travel together. And we met this lady on the streets of this village where every house somehow was damaged by tank guns or by some mortars or by some airstrikes. And this lady was just traveling on her bicycle and just crying. And obviously it was not because she saw some journalist, because we saw her on the horizon of the street already, you know, like cleaning her, wiping her tears. And then we just stopped her and asked for some information, and after that we just couldn't stop her. She was just such a talker, and she was talking for like 40 minutes about how did she survive the occupation, what kind of soldiers were the most brutal. And this picture actually is the moment when we asked her what kind of ethnicities of Russian army have you met in your village, and she told that Russians and the members of DNR and LNR republic, so-called republics, separatist republics, they were less violent than Buryats. Buryats, it's Asian ethnicity on the east of Russia, and this is the moment when she tried to make us understand who is she talking about, and she made this extremely racist gesture on the West. But why I chosen this picture is because the circumstances of this picture actually maybe excuses this gesture, because for this extremely traumatized woman, not really educated on political correctness and new ethics, for her it was pure experience and pure emotions and memory of these faces that she saw every day. And she told us about rapes and murders of civilian population in her village. And yeah, this picture is it's not my favorite aesthetically, but exactly a historical moment for me is very important. Next picture was made quite recently in September. It's a body of civilian person after exhumation in Izum, Kharkiv region, after liberation of Izum and retreat of Russian soldiers. Why I've chosen this picture, even though I had much more pictures of dead people, because it was 430 or 470 people buried in this forest, where Russians actually buried the victims of the shellings or the ones who they executed. There was a lot of people with cut off genitals. There was some children, some elders. There were a lot of people with tied hands and with obvious signs of violence. And I've chosen this picture because there was a lot of police, national police, guarding the territory, from journalists, from photographers, TV groups, and they put a lot of red lines, as we usually have in such places. They just made this square. They separated territory from journalists, so you could make pictures only with big telelenses or with or just making pictures of the bodies who lay very close to this line. And when I saw this body, I actually saw this this hand that is, I just saw how beautiful this hand lays on the ground full of sand after maybe 2 or 3 months laying in this sands, in this forest. And I decided immediately just to cross the line and run. It was like 3 or 4 meters, and I didn't make any problems for the police or for the volunteers who were digging them out. But I was just magnetized by this elegance of this hand of this dead body, which is dead for many months. But this beauty of and elegance of his hand for me was the sign of life. And maybe this is the sacrifice that I was decided to make, to risk and to violate this so-called journalism ethics, because usually it's treated as unethical to cross the lines and run to such places. But this is the point that I wanted to make all these 5 minutes, that sometimes you can make ethical pictures violating the rules of ethics, and vice versa. You can make unethical pictures acting absolutely according to these so-called rules. So yeah, this is pretty much it.
Thank you. I think we can close here for the moment and actually open the discussion. It is really difficult actually right now to find a way to actually communicate, because these protests are very drastic. They are graphic, as I said at the beginning. I want to kind of give you a moment to kind of collect yourselves, but maybe you do have questions, especially with regard to this ethics that Daniil just talked about. You now have the possibility to also ask Leo, to ask Mariia, and to ask Yulia some more questions.
You mean me asking questions?
No, I rather meant the audience, sorry.
Yes, sorry, okay, I got you correctly, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
My name is Jonas, and when I talked to other Ukrainians, my experience was that many of them had a story where Westerners, in this case probably Germans, explained to them the conflict. And I just wanted to ask if you want to talk about this, your experiences regarding this. I also experienced it myself as somebody who knows the region a bit and then speaks to other Germans, but of course that's not quite the same. So I would really be interested to hear if there were instances where Germans explained to you the conflict or your country. Thank you.
Yeah, I maybe would like to answer this. I didn't have a lot of meetings with Germans in person, because I left Ukraine only once during all these 8 months, and I left it to Hamburg to participate in exhibition. And even though I had some kind of prejudices before this trip to Hamburg, I heard it many times that German intellectuals signed some letter. I didn't follow. I will say frankly, I didn't follow all these topics, but I heard about this letter of intellectuals to stop supporting Ukraine, that the war should be ended soon. I've heard that most of the population of Germany actually thinks that everything is not that certain with the war in Ukraine, and you know, nationalists in Ukraine. So when I came to Germany, I was rather surprised in a good way, but most likely it was because I was in artistic ecosystem of gallery, of the guests, curators, and other photographers. When it comes to normal Germans that I met during my trip, the most awful situation that was in Scientology church where I went in Hamburg just for fun. And yeah, and the guy told me very funny things that Putin actually used the Sun Tzu Art of War plan, retreating from Kyiv, and that we are fooled by Americans. But I don't want to elaborate on this because he was obviously a lunatic. But I didn't have personally very negative situations with Germans. So as I say, I was rather surprised in a good way. And also after this trip, I saw the statistics that the amount of Germans understanding the situation and supporting the military aid to Ukraine actually increased. So
yeah. Actually, I have a different experience from Daniil. That's why I'm happy that Daniil didn't make these experiences here. Because since when we are talking about the war in Ukraine, then really little people mention that the war started in 2014 here. Like, people don't know. They talk about the war that started in February. And then everything before that is like something that you normally don't talk about because it's just so complex that you shouldn't talk about it. And then this is the thing, for example, I find myself mostly in the artistic, activist, feminist, queer, etc. circles, and also intellectual circles. And these are the people who are creating discourses here. These are the people who are calling people to go to the demonstrations. These are the people who write open letters. These are the people who curate exhibitions. These are the people like feminists, for example, who organize the groups of solidarity and stuff like this. And I, as a person from Ukraine living in Germany, felt really little solidarity here on this regards. I was so much explained, and there is a term for this, which is west-blamed. I was so much west-blamed what the situation really is, and actually what people in Ukraine are, who they are, and how complex it is, you know, like this kind of perspective on you that is really, really paternalistic. Like, you don't understand because you cannot think clearly. You're apparently too emotional. You're thinking too much on this, like, terms of local things, and you cannot look at the war on the global, bigger level and stuff like this. And this is not a feminist resistance. And feminists in Ukraine are too nationalist because they demand weapons, and this is not really the feminist fight because the feminist fight is not with weapons. All of these things that are really, really detached from reality, actually. And somehow it's really difficult because then, as a person from Ukraine, you have to all the time have this additional educational work that you are doing there, because you feel like, okay, I can't leave it like this, you know, I just have to do something. I have to all the time explain to people. I have all the time to defend my position, to prove that I'm not crazy Nazi or something like this. You know, if I demand weapons to be delivered to Ukraine, and this is something that I feel is really difficult, because what I feel like from the people that I should actually expect solidarity from, then what I do is all the time I try to get it somehow. And then it's just, to be honest, it's really difficult. And then people who are less involved in this like whole discourse work, then they're actually less biased, I feel. And then that's where I get much more support and much more understanding and stuff like this. And this is somehow contradicting to what Daniil said before. And then I must say that it's not all the time like this, but you know, sometimes this like one thing that is really, really negative has to be then replaced by 10 really good experiences that you make, because then this experience, especially if you experience war, then it's just so drastic. It's so emotionally overwhelming that sometimes you feel like you need hundreds of good experiences afterwards in order to cover up of what kind of emotional pressure you all the time feel to prove something or to have the space somewhere.
Julia, möchtest du auch gerne was sagen dazu?
Ich wollte meine Sommer 2014 auf Krim verbringen und immer noch kann ich nicht nachvollziehen, wie kann das sein? Einfach so das war doch früher Russland. Alle diese Sachen, die wir Ukrainer tatsächlich, unsere Stimme war schon stark, auch 2014 hier, alle Plakaten, Welt, guck nicht weg, Krim, das ist Ukraine, 2 Millionen Bienenflüchtlinge. In dieser Zeit, Krim-Annexion, die erste, die dann alle Häuser, alles verlassen haben, Krim-Tataren nach Westukraine geflohen sind. Die Leute, die schon 2014 Donetsk, Donbass, das Haus verloren haben und jetzt zweites Mal. Und in dieser kurzen Zeit, 8 Jahre, und dann solche Sachen, wie ich hier auch gehört habe, naja, Krim, ach komm, das war doch schon Russland. Und dann denkst du, okay, dann Altona gehörte auch Dänemark nach. Und dann weiter vielleicht so ein bisschen in Italien. Oder dann auf einmal, ja, ich hatte ganz viele Schwierigkeiten mit Ausländerbehörde, was ich jetzt merke, welche Spuren das hinterlassen hat, als ich jetzt für meine Eltern und meine Landsleute helfe. Und ich habe dann gesagt, es ist Krieg in der Ukraine. Ganz leise habe ich gesagt, weil das war ich schockiert. Und die Frau aus der Ausländerbehörde hat gesagt, na ja, aber das ist doch im Osten. Und doch aus dem Westen. Und das sind alle Männer, die nach Maidan-Revolution freiwillig nach Osten gegangen sind und da gestorben sind, noch ohne offiziellen Soldatstatus. Das ist natürlich schon so. Die Geschichte vergisst man leider sehr schnell. Das heißt, das ist Osten und ich komme aus Westen. Und es ist egal, wo das irgendwo. Und jetzt, das war doch Monaten, alle Panzer, hier noch diese Panzer trage ich nicht, was soll das? Und am 3. Tag, Leute, Kyiv, das ist Hauptstadt, und Freundin von mir kriegt Foto, wo ich hier jetzt Blätter sitze, und da steht Panzer. Und das ist Foto aus Kiewer Wohnung, die sie gekauft hat, alles happy, alles schön. Und da habe ich tatsächlich Angst bekommen. So eine Angst, dass jetzt auf einmal, genauso wie in Krim oder Ostukraine, auf einmal du bekommst Pass, du bist jetzt, das ist jetzt russische Flagge, und dann stehst du und sagst, aber wie jetzt? Und die Welt sagt, aber wann, vor 300 Jahren oder wo sind wir jetzt? Und ich konnte nicht verstehen, dass mein Bruder, einziger Mann auf dieser Welt, wo wir sind, nicht so, als er gesagt hat, ich gehe jetzt, wohin, Raphael? Wohin gehst du? Du warst mit 20 Jahren an der Armee, hattest Trauma, ganzes Leben Alkoholismus, jetzt auf einmal wach, nüchtern, wie alle Männer. Um zu vergleichen, russische Armee oder ukrainische, was natürlich die ganze Welt gibt und die Leute, das ist ein Wunder und ich glaube an die Wunder. Aber auf welche Kosten? Und es geht nicht um das Geld. Dieser Wunder möglich ist und der Bus fährt, stopp den Krieg. Wir sehen ganz viele Plagen. Und wie wäre es, wenn wir alle dann zu Hause geblieben hätten? Und ich glaube, jeder von euch hat schon so eigene Erfahrungen mit Ukraine. Aber ich als Ukrainerin, einfach gut ab, was jetzt in dieser Zeit, im 21. Jahrhundert in meinem Land ist. Natürlich, das ist nicht nur Ukraine, aber die Frauen, die Kinder jetzt zur Welt bringen im Keller, die Leute, die sitzen jetzt ohne Licht und Wasser und wir sind immer noch da. Und es geht nicht nur um die Ukraine. Und dass wir schon heute hier sitzen, das ist Universität, das gibt mir Hoffnung eigentlich. Ein Grund, warum ich nach Deutschland gekommen bin, weil ich wollte Waldorfschule gründen, hier Ausbildung bekommen. Mein Plan war sehr schnell, studieren, Sponsoren finden, zurück, Schule bauen. Heimatstadt Lutz gibt es keine. Aber das ist so ukrainische Planung. Deutsche Planung, du musst einen Plan haben. In der Ukraine, du weißt es, jeden Tag musst du dein Leben neu gestalten. Und ich bin immer noch geblieben, wie Maren gesagt hat, im März ganz viele Leute eingeladen habe. Wir waren viele in Bergstedt Schule nach den Sommerferien. Viele sind zurück und sind jetzt da in Kyiv, Lutsk, im Keller, machen die weiter Waldorf, das Leben geht weiter. Und ich frage, warum? Vielleicht noch ein bisschen hier bleiben und ein bisschen diese Kinder schützen. Und dann Mama von einem Kind sagt zu mir, weißt du was? Ja, ständige Sirenen, dann müssen wir schlafen. Wie heißt diese Wand? Das ist so eine Wand zu Hause, wo du war sehr, siehst du, ich kenne diese Begriffe auch nicht. Nur wie das einfach in jeder Wohnung hat so eine Wand, wo am sichersten ist. Das heißt, du musst nicht vom Fenster sein, das jedes Kind. Genau.
Eine tragende Wand.
Tragende Wand. Da sind die alle so auf diese tragende Wand. Und da sagte sie, dann für mich ist es viel lieber hier mit meinem Mann und meine Kinder hier sterben. Und das ist auch Reality. Und in Maidan-Revolution, das war auch so ein Plakat, Люди, вы прекрасны. Leute, ihr seid beautiful, nicht im Sinne, wie siehst du, sondern was gibst du und was jetzt endlich nach 8 Jahren das Land so viel Aufmerksamkeit bekommen hat, kann ich mich immer noch nicht freuen. Aber die Frage, was ich vielleicht hier stellen möchte, wir wissen schon alle, wie man Krieg beginnt oder das alles, aber wie endet man Krieg? Das würde ich genau wissen.
Gestern Abend hier sein müssen.
Ja, okay, dann vielleicht erzählt ihr mir später.
I would like to take the opportunity for one more question before we actually close this entire panel. Susanne Kassmann, you also had a question to ask.
Yeah, I have a question for Daniil, or actually 2 questions. You said that you do not have concepts, but my impression was that you have many ideas concerning your work. And I was wondering, when you say you document, do you have a sense of you must see your photographs, or is it just document? I don't know how to name that. So do you have the idea the world must see it, or we must fix it, and the history must see it, or yeah, this is one question. And the other one, you so vividly described this hand. And can you say something about the relationship between it came? The impression was that it was rather life than death that you took a photograph of. And how is this relationship of documenting destruction and saying something about life? You also said you photograph the rubble. So what is this moment of destruction or life?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think this first question is actually the source of big conflict, because obviously what I'm doing has some humanitarian motive, and I don't want this war to go on. And I want Ukraine to win. I want Ukraine to receive more weapons. I want the world to understand more than that Russia is imperialistic, fascist, authoritarian dictatorship. And I want people to understand that negotiation with Russia impossible in any form. But at the same time, I don't think my photography serves this this purposes, because as I said, for me it's rather some subjective internal journey. It's finding myself in all this situation, and the fact that these pictures by some people are treated as a source of an idea of understanding some things about war. It's a coincidence. It's a very good coincidence. And of course, I cannot say that it's just a pure documenting. I think I have some aesthetical understanding of the moment. And when I go to these places, I don't look for actually, what I'm doing is I'm pretending I'm a journalist, because to get to the places, to military brigades, to medical points, stabilization centers, to mass graves, you need to send you need to go through some bureaucracy, and to do it successfully you need to pretend to be a journalist. And of course, at least in our country, and it's a big problem right now, journalism rather means some informative documentary work. It doesn't all this bureaucratic structure doesn't think about any aesthetical or long, in other word, long-term projects. So of course I have to play a role. I have to pretend that you know, I'm also documenting and informing, and my pictures serve this purpose. But this is why for me it's some kind of conflict, because I know that saying this even on this panel is not very good from me, maybe. But as I say, as a person, I do what I can to support Ukraine, and I don't have like blurry ethical understanding of this war. I'm on maximum level pro-Ukrainian, but I don't think that my photography is serving this purposes.
Thank you. I believe there aren't any more questions. It is very difficult to actually find any concluding remarks here, and I think I will avoid exactly that. I will stay clear of that. I just want you guys to thank you for actually not only sharing the stories, but actually taking us on a journey with you, what you actually did over the past 8 months, and what you actually have tried to accomplish, to actually, show us what the perspective is on your side. I think it has actually some educational purpose that you're fulfilling here, and thank you for that. Stay safe, Daniil, stay safe, Leo in Kyiv, and we'll talk soon. Thank you to here that stayed with us. Thank you for actually bearing with us, that you actually had the guts to look at those photos and bear with us. I hope this was actually quite thought-provoking. If not for the whole conference, then this is something that you need to take home and talk about with your dearest ones. Okay, thank you so much. We're closing here. I thank you for having been here for the whole conference. I hope you learned a lot. I have to say, I learned a lot. Especially, I'm glad and thankful for all the different perspectives that we actually had present here. And I'm really glad to see that IR is not one-dimensional, but that we actually have much more to offer than Herr Friedmunkler had us think. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Julia actually brought this dress with her. Julia, du hast dieses Kleid mitgebracht.
Danke, genau.
Möchtest du noch mal kurz darauf eingehen?
Wie du siehst, Alina, покажи свое платьишко. Für mich eigentlich ist es immer noch keine Revolution, sondern Evolution, ja? Evolution einer Schmetterling. Und das habe ich so ein Buch gemacht, um zu zeigen, dass ich Journalistin bin. Das war alles vor 8 Jahren, nicht möglich, in diesem Bereich zu arbeiten, was ich eigentlich in der Ukraine gemacht habe. Im Vergleich zu jetzt neue Leute, die gekommen sind, die natürlich die Sprache muss man lernen, aber meine Eltern haben jetzt 2 Jahre Aufenthaltstitel, Jahren gebraucht, um Aufenthalt zu bekommen. Und das Buch war so als Beweis, dass ich doch Journalistin bin, weil ich konnte nur im Bereich arbeiten. Wahnsinn. Und da sind die, kann man die Amazon bestellen, natürlich ohne meine Bilder. Freund hat gekauft, sagte Marushko, was ist das? So wenig, so teuer. Aber ich finde es schon gut, dass hier ein Märchen ist, Evolution eines Schmetterlings. Weil für mich eigentlich, es geht um Evolution. Und wie du siehst, meine neue Freundin Alina, sie trägt mein Kleid, weil ich kaufe immer noch in Kinderabteilung. Überall sind diese Schmetterlinge. Und das Kleid, das ist mein Revolutionskleid, also sowohl für alle Frauen. Und im Vergleich, naja, vor 8 Jahren, jetzt nicht nur Männer, sondern ganz viele Frauen kämpfen auch. Und tatsächlich, Frauengesicht wollten wir hier auch einleuchten. Ja? Und diese Wörter jetzt bleibt Stay in Life sehr aktuell. Das heißt, Krieg hat natürlich ganz positive Sachen. Zum Beispiel, in jeder Sekunde, du bist da und du weißt, dass nächste Sekunde kann die letzte sein. Und ich weiß nicht, wolltest du nur diese Fotos zeigen oder das ist schon so? Okay. Gut, und wie gesagt, meine Mama betet für alle Deutschen. Sie hat auch einen Plan, Ukraine aufzubauen, dass die Deutschen müssen mithelfen. Und ich bin persönlich sehr dankbar an alle private Initiativen, dass in diesem stattfinden, dass wir auch Kinder hier, Mädchen, Filme und Kindheit schenken können. Weil das ist genauso für Erwachsene als für Kinder sehr, sehr wichtig. Und wenn ein Flugzeug fliegt, dass man einfach nicht reagiert, gar nicht. Oder nicht, sogar ich, obwohl ich das persönlich nicht mitbekommen habe, das Leben ist schön, müssen wir alle wieder lernen.
Dankeschön.